There are places where the earth holds its breath, guarding secrets that refuse to be unearthed. In the dusty, sun-scorched lowlands of what is now southwestern Iran, the desert wind moves with a patient, relentless whisper. It brushes against crumbling mudbrick mounds that barely rise above the plain, their true shape lost to the grinding weight of millennia. To the untrained eye, these are just weary hills scattered with pottery shards, but their silence is an illusion. Yet for centuries, its name has lingered only in the footnotes of history, the forgotten shadow of a far more famous rival. This is the empire of Elam, a civilization that rose alongside Sumer in the cradle of human memory, only to vanish into a profound and unnerving silence. Imagine standing upon the citadel mound of Susa, the once great capital, feeling the grit of ancient crushed brick beneath your feet. The air tastes of dust and a strange, hollow stillness that makes the bustling cities of Mesopotamia feel like a distant, feverish dream. Directly to the west, the rivers of Sumer gave birth to writing, kingship, and the first sprawling temples of Uruk. We are taught that history's memory flows from those riverbanks. But if you look east, into the shimmering haze, a different current stirs. Elam was not just a neighbor to Sumer. It was a mirror, a rival, a proud and often hostile force that stared back across the marshes for over 2,000 years. The Sumerians called them the people from the highlands, the inhabitants of Nim. But the Elamites had their own name for their land, Haltamti. And from that name, from that fiercely independent identity, they forged a kingdom that refused to simply borrow culture, choosing instead to bend it into something wholly their own. This is not merely the story of a forgotten rivalry. It is a journey into the very nature of how history is written and by whom it is cruelly erased. The facts, though fragmented, demand our attention. As early as 2700 BC, the Elamite city-states, notably Anshan and Susa, were already trading, warring, and negotiating with the dynasties of Sumer. Picture a scribe in Susa, hunched over a clay tablet, the oil lamp casting deep, dancing shadows on the kiln-fired brick walls around him. He presses a stylus into the soft, smooth clay, recording a treaty or a debt. But the signs he carves are a locked door that would not budge for thousands of years. His language, Elamite, does not descend from Akkadian or Sumerian. It stands alone, a brilliant, stubborn anomaly on the linguistic landscape of the ancient Near East. For archaeologists and linguists, uncovering a new Elamite tablet is both a gift and a haunting curse. We can hold the physical record of a king's proclamation, touch the very grooves left by a human hand in 2200 BC, but the meaning often evaporates in our grasp. This partial blindness colors everything we think we know about them, turning their history into a vast, tarnished mirror, reflecting only shattered fragments. What we do see in those fragments, however, is a realm of startling ambition. They descended onto the Mesopotamian plain, sacking cities and carrying away the spoils of conquest, engaging in a brutal, centuries-long dance of power. One of the most breathtaking pieces of art ever recovered, the Victory Stele of Naram-Sin, was actually stolen from Sippar by an Elamite king, Shutruk-Nakhunte. If you examine the stele today, you can see the two layers of history, a conqueror and a ghost king sharing the same carved stone in a silent, eternal standoff. They built sprawling temple complexes like the sacred grove at Chogha Zanbil, a massive ziggurat that rises from the desert like a geometric mountain. It is one of the best preserved structures of its kind. Yet inside its walls, the air vibrates with a heavy, sacred emptiness, the name of the god it served still largely unspoken. It was dedicated to Inshushinak, the lord of Susa, a psychopomp god who guarded the dead and the threshold to the underworld. And it is here, at the threshold of the underworld, that the labyrinth of Elamite belief begins to swallow the narrow certainties of mainstream history. The theory that Elam was just a peripheral, barbaric echo of Sumer crumbles to dust the moment you stand before their metallurgy, unmatched in the region for its delicate animal forms and intricate goldwork. A silver pommel from a ceremonial dagger, shaped like a grinning lion with lapis lazuli eyes, testifies to a world of sophisticated ritual and immense royal wealth. Where Sumerians built with the mud of the rivers, Elamites also turned to the stone of the mountains, blending highland and lowland materials into an architecture of defiant hybridity. The physical evidence tells a story of a peer rival, not a pupil, a civilization that chose to trade ideas on its own terms, retaining a core identity we are still struggling to decode. Yet, as the centuries churned and the dust settled, the name Elam began to fade from the annals of the living. This brings us to the deep, uncomfortable silence at the heart of the labyrinth. If Elam stood as a superpower for over 2 millennia, why is its memory so opaque, so crushed under the weight of Sumerian, Babylonian, and Persian grand narratives? One theory points to the very geography that protected them. History was kept there, but on materials that perished, in cities that were razed and rebuilt so many times that their foundations are a chaotic knot. Another, darker hypothesis suggests a cultural and linguistic genocide of memory. The clay tablets stopped being written. The voices of the past were filed down into a pre-Persian darkness, a usefully blank void upon which a new empire could be built. A darker strain of thought posits that the Elamites themselves may have wanted it this way. Perhaps they saw their rituals, their invocation of labyrinthine underworld gods, as powers that should not be read by profane eyes beyond the grave. Local whispers among those who live near the ruins speak of a restless silence, a sense that the dead of Susa are not sanctified in the rest that history usually provides. Where archaeology faltered, local legend began to fill the silence, weaving tales of sleeping armies and condemned kings awaiting a forgotten judgment. It is a psychological truth that gaps in our knowledge do not remain empty. They are filled by a creeping, existential dread, a reminder that entire worlds can vanish without a trace. To walk through the eroded labyrinth of Chogha Zanbil at dusk is to feel that dread settle coldly on your skin. The setting sun spills orange gold over the baked brick, yet the shadows inside the temple gates seem to resist the light, pooling like a dense ancient liquid. Where the eye expects hieroglyphs of kings and gods, the walls are often maddeningly bare, stripped of their glazed brickwork by time and the recycling of empires. You can hear the echo of your own footsteps in the dust, but the echoes of the priests who chanted here are lost, swallowed by the grinding clockwork of wind and weather. This is the human element, the obsession that grips those who dedicate their lives to this lost civilization. They trace the same repeating sign with a trembling finger, a triangle here, a cross-hatched circle there, praying for a shift in perspective that cracks the code. Decades of a single human life can be poured into interpreting a single scrap of pottery, the researcher aging alongside the 4,000-year-old clay that refuses to yield its final secret. We tell ourselves that time reveals all things, but as you look upon these scholars' tireless, haunted eyes, you realize time only conceals, buries, and erodes. There is no comfort here, only the raw, human fascination with the void, the same instinct that makes us stare into a deep well, expecting to see our own reflection. You stand at the edge of a ruined palace, and for a moment the lost duality of Elam becomes almost unbearably personal. It is a civilization that exists precisely at the border between the known and the unknowable, a stark monument to the limits of human certainty. Over the centuries, many have tried to fill this silence with grand narratives, searching for the missing link that would bind Elam to a comfortable evolutionary story. Some attempted to link them to the Indus Valley, others to the highland tribes of the Caspian Fringe. But the genetic and written record remains a defiant, isolated enigma. The search for Elam's soul has consumed more minds than it has rewarded, leaving a trail of exhaustive monographs and tragically unfinished dictionaries. The French archaeologists who first sunk their spades into the soil of Susa in the late 19th century were not just looking for mud bricks. They were digging for a rival to the biblical narrative of Babel, a dark twin to the cradle of civilization that might rewrite the entire origin story of the Middle East. What they found was a monarch who called himself King of the Universe, a title that was not meant as poetry, but as a chilling geopolitical statement echoing through the deep ravines of the Zagros. Yet, the deeper they dug, the more the earth seemed to swallow its own evidence, smashing statues methodically and filling the wells with the broken bones of their ultimate royal victims. The fever of the search turns archaeological method into a kind of seance, a desperate conversation with a ghost that refuses to speak your language. Every grain of sand that slips through an archaeologist's sieve is a wasted fragment of a collapsed city, a granular reminder that we save almost nothing of the actual past. There is a profound melancholy here, a sorrow not just for a lost empire, but for the limitations of the human mind that seeks it. We are a species defined by our desperate need to preserve memory, yet Elam laughs silently from the abyss, holding its secrets tight. As we leave the labyrinth of ruins, the sun low on the Khuzestan horizon, the thin wailing of a desert wind picks up, moving the sand in shifting, serpentine patterns. The sand covers the footprints of archaeologists and looters alike, returning the site to the pristine, unreal silence that preceded the dawn of writing. What remains of Elam is not a solved puzzle, but a persistent, uncanny presence at the edge of our vision, a shadow civilization that hums beneath the melody of history. It reminds us that for every Sumer there is an Elam, a darkness that balances the light of our knowledge, a lost chord in the symphony of mankind. The enduring enigma is not simply where they went, but how we should carry the weight of what we have lost. It suggests that some truths may be physically present, yet permanently inaccessible, locked within a wavelength of consciousness that died with the last literate scribe. We have the stone, we have the clay, we have the gleaming silver cups, but the animating spirit, the voice, has been banished into the vast, silent abyss of deep time. If you listen closely to the wind that tumbles through the ziggurats' gates, it does not sound like a whisper. It sounds like a held breath. It is the breath of a civilization that refuses to be merely a fossil, preferring to remain a lingering question, a prickling sensation at the back of humanity's collective neck. The stars emerge over Susa now, the same stars that watched the Elamite watchmen patrol the walls 4 millennia ago. These celestial fires, indifferent and eternal, are the only true witnesses to the entire arc of Elamite power, from the first brick to the final collapse into silence. It is humbling, even terrifying, to realize that our entire civilization is constructing the same kind of fragile, erodable memory this very second, storing our souls in data centers that may one day be just as mute. The enigma of Elam is, in the end, the enigma of ourselves, the inevitable quiet twilight that waits for every empire, no matter how loud its boasting. There is no closure here, No final chapter where the key turns in the lock and the ancient voice suddenly speaks in perfect clarity. Only the weathered stone, the shifting sand, and the eternal, beautifully sinister dance of shadows moving across the old maps in the lantern light. The silence of the forgotten empire endures, patient as bedrock, vast as the starlit firmament, waiting for a revelation that, perhaps, was never meant to be heard by mortal ears. And so, the dust settles over Haltamti, and we are left with the rarest and most unsettling treasure of all, a mystery that refuses to be solved.